chew toothpicks because that's what I do when I'm not smoking.
That is fine. That works. All right, so now I'm gonna go there, and then I'm gonna pull up the event on the phone.
See if it's showing up.
See if it's showing up. It's been a couple of times where it has not gone live. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and so I've had to sort of jerry-rig it and do it a different way.
Okay.
But it's actually working this time. It's actually working this time. Yes. Success is right. No, we got to turn down the volume on the phone now. Okay. All right.
People are like texting me. I'm like, I'm live on Facebook right now. Stop bothering me.
Go away.
Or come into the chat. Come talk.
Or come, yes, or come hither and be part. So I will admit that I have not read My Heart is a Chainsaw, and I have not read Don't Fear the Reaper yet. Although I did get my copy. It was the last copy in the Barnes and Noble here in Maine.
Same. When I went to Barnes and Noble, it was the last copy. They had it on a display table. And I was like, yoink. You know, I was going there to get the newest issue of Fangoria, because he was writing an article for that as well. And I was like, oh, I forgot. I don't have Don't Fear the Reaper yet.
Yep.
I need to get that.
Yeah, there was an end cap. Somebody had made an end cap, and it was the last one on the end cap, and there were none left in the hardcover section. So, yeah.
I remember, maybe you do too, when Barnes & Nobles was kind of like swirling the drain. And then the past few years, they've had individual stores have been really kind of cultivating a horror section, or people who are horror related, like Chance Forshee, Tiff down in Richmond. I don't know her last name. I forget what her handle is on Twitter. And that's nice because, something like that. And that's really nice. The Barnes & Nobles, for me, is like 45 minutes away from my house. I live in a small Northern Virginia town. And I went there and I was like, oh God, is this going to be like, it's going to be just Stephen King and maybe a Josh Mallerman, Josh is a great guy, good writer. Yeah. But I'm like, what am I going to see? And they had Clay McLeod. They had Rachel Harrison. I picked that up. They had Manhunt by Gretchen Felcher. I don't know the last name.
Martin. Yeah.
I've been meaning to read that. I was like, oh, thank you. A good horror section. I don't have to buy off Amazon. So I was like, I picked Don't Fear the Reaper up, The Return, Manhunt. What else did I pick up? I picked up a Rick Riordan book for my daughter because she loves the Percy Jackson series. We've been reading slowly through them, waiting for the new show. But it was so nice to walk. I was like, it was like the last shelf in the book section of Barnes and Nobles. And I'm like, I was starting to sweat. I was like, come on, horror's having a heyday. And then I got there and I was like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, my local one has been really good. Like it's filling out with a lot of interesting dynamic choices that I haven't seen. And when I was there, I got 13 stories. Was it 13 episodes? Which is the new Craig DeLuey. I'm going to say his name wrong.
Oh, Craig DeLuey. No.
It looks incredible. And I was like, this I wasn't intending to get, but I'm going to get.
You've read stuff for the children, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So don't feel. There's so many books. I've never bought into the idea of shaming someone if they don't get around to something immediately. We read when we get it. Like, that's why TBR piles exist.
Yeah.
But I'd heard of Craig. I heard of the book, and I was in a thrift store one day. My wife and I love thrift stores because you find random shit. And I saw Craig DeLuey, and there was a blurb by Jack Ketchum, and he's one of my guys. Yeah. This is my shelf of my inspiration. Well, besides the commercials for me, and John Mayberry. So I pick it up, and if you don't know the premise without spoiling it, at one point, all the children above until a certain age drop dead, like across the globe.
Okay,
they all die, And the world freaks out. What do? They start, the horrendous activity of burying your children, but not just burying your children, putting them in a mass grave. And then just as they're beginning the process, so some are being buried, but most of them still aren't, they come back. They wake up. But now they have a thirst for blood. And then it becomes a very human story of these parents. Do you, do the moral thing of, no, I will not kill for my child, or it's your child. My wife read it before I did, and then I read it. I was like, this is amazing. I was talking about it in class one day, and I was teaching juniors at the time, 11th graders. And one kid asked to borrow it. And then another kid asked to borrow it. And it slowly circulated my classroom.
Nice.
And then went down to the 9th graders. And it was so popular. The librarian at the time was like, hey, should I be getting a copy for the school library? And that was before all the library bullshit was happening. But I was like, it's not YA. And she's like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. We have some Stephen King. And she pulled up the premise. And she was and I'm standing at the partition, just kind of chit-chatting. And then she reads it and then looks up at me slowly. Like, what is wrong? You gave this to children? And then one kid, I sent this to Craig because he and I used to talk a little bit more. We haven't talked in a few years. I said, this kid made a movie. Like, what if the book became a movie?
Oh,
He made a trailer. And he had his little sister who I then later taught. So I could use the trailer to embarrass her because she was like 6 at the time when she acted in his little movie. He made a trailer for the book. And I sent it to Craig, and he sent a little note back to that student.
That's so
But no,
cool.
Craig's a good writer. So I hadn't heard about 13 Stories. So
it's it's a very I'm forgetting the word for it, but it's told in interviews and reports and things like that, and that really interests me because I'm trying
epistolary
like that. That's the word. I'm trying to do something like that right now, so I'm trying to read as much of that right now as I can.
I've done it once. It's currently out to market somewhere. I did a scrapbook. I told a story via scrapbook.
Oh, cool.
And it was, I'm a very linear writer. I have a random vague idea of the ending, and then but I have the inciting incident to what if, and then they work their way out. But with epistolary, you kind of have to plan it, especially if you only have so many words to play with. Like I did it in a novelette. I did it in 6,000 words. I was able to do it in 6,000 words. Cool. And it's hard. Gary Braunbeck, have you ever read him?
I haven't, but I definitely know the name.
He's a great novelist. He's an excellent short story writer. And he wrote, when I was an editor of a magazine like a decade ago, he sent us a story where it was like a series of Polaroids. And the captions that went along with the Polaroid. And as the pictures went on, it became darker and darker. And it was really well done. He told it in like 2003. I'd have to pull up the old manuscript if I still have it somewhere. But he told it like 3,000 words, and it was fantastic. Because epistolary, there's this idea that the main character is alive. That's the kind of the conceit of a first person. Like the main character is talking to you is alive. But epistolary, you assume that, but that's not necessarily true. Because it could just be a found artifact. And I think that's what I like about it. Like you get that intimacy of first person POV, but the possibility that no, they didn't necessarily live. Like they're gone.
And time is, you can really play with time too, and I like that. So that's what I'm currently trying to mess with. But I digress. We're 10 minutes into our live video, and we do have somebody that has commented in the chat, and they said her name is Lori. She says, hi, Paul. I just ordered Standalone from my local bookstore on the recommendation of a friend, Eric at 4Color Comics in Winchester, Virginia. Super stoked to get it. Just wanted to say hi instead of feeling like a creeper.
Hi, Lori. Eric told me about that because he's reading the new book right now. And he apparently had recommended Standalone. So I hope you would like it. So You're getting that from the Walking Mall. I always forget what the store's name because I love that store and I always forget the name. So I'm terrible. So Lori, that's awesome. A, thank you for buying the book. And B, thank you for buying it from a local seller. That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for commenting, and same here. Like, local bookstores are awesome. Definitely support your indie bookstores. So I'm going to introduce the video.
10.5 minutes in. Sure. Why not?
Yes. 10.5 minutes in. Welcome to Winterviews Series 2, Episode 6. I'm your host, Catherine Silva, Cat for short. And today we're talking about slashers with Pike.
Christopher Pike. I'm Christopher
Pike. Paul Michael Anderson. I really wanted
so
Paul and Mike to be in one.
It's fair.
Yeah.
I used to just go by Paul Anderson. Then everyone, there's Paul W.S. Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson. And it's like, okay. Paul Dale Anderson was a horror writer in the 80s. And I'm like, screw it. I'm Paul Michael Anderson.
Hey, it works. I've recently gone about, there is another Catherine Silva who is also an author who wrote one book like 15 years ago. And it's about like a woman in South America who has all these like herbs and medicinal plants and shit, and everybody thinks that I'm this person.
Yep. I know that pain.
Very common name.
Yeah, Paul Anderson's incredibly common. I mean,
yes.
And Anderson itself is so common. Like my students are researching. They're doing a writing thing right now, and every time an article writer's last name Anderson, do you know this person? Like, no.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Silva, I always think of the founder of the website Hell Notes, which I'm not even sure if it's still around. I always think of David Silva. I even named a character after him after he passed away, because he passed away, like a decade ago. And he was a big booster early on in my career. So I named a character after him that was in my first book.
Nice. Yeah, I recently had somebody looking for that author who messaged me and asked me if I could get them in touch with them after I said that I didn't know them. So
yes, the similar name telepathy.
Yeah, that or the underground network of Silvas that exists.
Yeah.
The Catherine Silvas, we all know each other. We can all.
I can relate. Us Paul Andersons, we meet once a year in Utah and fight.
Yeah, that's a fantastic concept. Oh my God. There's a book right there.
Right. No, I started using my middle name because of that. Like, there are so many Paul Andersons who had like been sports journalists or regular journalists or self-published writers. And like, I'm only a short story writer at the time. I didn't have any books to my name. And I'm like, I would like it if Amazon could list my stuff. So I was talking with Damien Angelica Walters, and she uses, her middle name, or she added Damien. I forget. Because otherwise it's just Damien Walters, who's, I can think of two other writers with that name. So she's like, Damien Angelica Walters. She's like, 3 names sounds good. And I was like, yeah, I agree. Actually, it's gotten to the point now that when I sign my first and my last name, I feel like I'm missing something. Like when I teach, I'm not Paul Michael Anderson. I'm Mr. Anderson or Mr. A or Paul Anderson in official documents. Yeah. So when I sign that, I'm like, I'm forgetting something.
Yeah. We're going to talk about slashers this evening. Intro to topic about slashers. My first question is, what is it about the slasher genre that fascinates you?
I mean, I'm a kid of the 80s and that was their heyday. My first memory of like horror films, my mom's a horror fan. Has always been a horror fan. It's not like she, plopped me down in my toddler pants and said, hey, watch, the Dream Warriors. But I remember seeing it. Like, one of my earliest memories is, I forget which Nightmare on Elm Street it is, but it's the bus that is on a precipice and it's tipping, but Freddy Krueger's the bus driver. And I don't know why I remembered that. So I grew up in the 80s. It stuck with me. I mean, when I was a kid, being a kid from Pittsburgh, which is Tom Savini, George Romero, Greg Nicotero, they're all from there. Heavy special effects city. So initially, when I was a kid, it was the effects. Like, what did you pull off? What gag, as they call it? Like, I used to love the show Face Off for that reason. When I became when I became a working writer, it became like there's nothing. I mean, the later Friday the 13th are an exception, of course, Freddy Krueger, but there's a very human element to a good slasher. Mm-hmm. And I've always been attracted to the human element in horror. To the point now, I was doing something, and I was looking at an old piece of mine that was more cosmic horror, and I realized that cosmic horror, not there's anything wrong with it, or the weird, there's nothing wrong with that type of horror or weirdness. It's just not my bag. And it took me a few years to kind of realize after I'd done a few pieces of cosmic horror, and I was like, it's just not where my interest lies most of the time. If this cosmic horror very couched in human terms, I'm on board.
Yeah.
But I don't really care about elder gods. I'm an atheist, for Christ's sake. I have no interest. So I've always nowadays, when I think of a good slasher, and when I say good, I mean, not necessarily the kills or anything like that, but like it's couched in the gritty human element. I love that. Mm-hmm. I love that human element.
Yeah, I was just reading before our interview. There was an interview that went up with Stephen Graham Jones about his
I read that.
Yeah, and he was talking about the human element of slashers and that they're more personal, and how he had been watching Alien or something, and and hadn't, it was a creature, so it just didn't feel as personal as slashers with people with morality.
I mean, oh, go ahead.
No, that was it.
No, I read that interview, and I thought it was related because you could make the argument that Alien is a slasher in space.
Yeah.
I think elsewhere he had said that, and so I don't want to take credit for an idea that's not originally mine. But like, you have this supernatural creature, no more supernatural than Jason Voorhees in the later Friday the 13th or Freddy Krueger from the jump, stalking and killing these people. Now, it doesn't follow the classic formula that kind of got codified in the 80s, but you could definitely make an argument that it has certain highlights, touchstones of a slasher. Now, Aliens, fuck no, but Alien or Alien 3, which I defend to my dying day. I love Alien 3. If Nick Mamatas is watching, he's like, yes, someone else. But yeah, there's a human element. When you get too supernatural, like, my mother loves ghost stories, and ghost stories are good. I like them too. And there's a possibility, but a lot of horror, and again, I'm not casting aspersions, I'm not throwing shade, it's just not my bag. A lot of horror, when they talk about the supernatural, they're more interested in this weirdness that is infiltrated the real world. And that's fine. That's one perspective, one way of into the story, whether it's a movie or a book or something. My nose is itchy, so I feel like I look like a cokehead in the 80s. Let's talk about slashers. But we hurry, there are ninjas on the fucking lawn trying to kill us, But I lost my point. No. I do that all the time.
That was the previous 10 minutes before everybody joined.
But no, slashers, horror stories that kind of focus on the supernatural element. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, and this slashers, it comes baked in because it's human versus human, man versus man. You can really play with the personalities, the characterizations. To me, it's just easier to get into that through a slasher. A good slasher, anyway.
Yeah. Well, that is the segue to the next question, which is, in your opinion, what are the defining characteristics of a perfect or near perfect slasher in your...
So I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that. all day today, actually, because about going on 3 years ago. We're gonna hit the 3-year anniversary. I wrote a slasher called Standalone. Actually, what Lori bought. Voila. Available at all fine retailers. But anyway, as part of the promotional stuff, I started writing articles for like Lit Reactor and Crime Reads, and I rewatched or watched so many fucking slashers, read so many slashers, as many as I could find on my budget. And there is a formula, and there are certain tropes. I'm saying that like I just coined the phrase. There are certain tropes within the genre that can be played bad or not. For me, and this could almost be universal, is I like it when in a slasher, not that the kills are inventive, but the kills feel earned. There are certain slashers that like it is just a numbers game. Here's how we're gonna pick off. Here's how we're going to pick off in the most interesting ways to showcase the special effects if we're talking about film. And that's fine. I love a good gag. I love it. Like, the first Friday the 13th with Kevin Bacon getting the arrow through, spoilers for a 50-year-old movie, 40-year-old movie, getting the arrow through his neck, and the flesh looked real. I know how the gag was pulled off, but it looked real. For me, I like the fact the stakes are clear. Again, it's that man versus man. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy. It's if you're lucky and if you're good at what you do in terms of the application, the telling of the story, those stakes become not black and white, but very gray. One of my favorite slasher movie is a movie that no one has seen. Because it just didn't get distribution, but it came out in 2006. It's called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. Actually, I have my Leslie Vernon mask right here. And it's such, like, everyone talks about how meta Scream is, and I'm going to speak a blasphemy. I don't like Scream. I know a lot of people love it. My mom likes it. Tons of people love it, and that's cool. But it never clicked for me. Because it felt, my criticism of it is that, yes, it was very meta. It was very aware of what came before it. But instead of doing something clever with those tropes, it just kind of winked at the audience like, hey, do you recognize this? And that's that you could probably take some other things. Again, not throwing shade because everyone likes different things. But Behind the Mask, for those who haven't seen it, which is literally most people, Behind the Mask is about 4 college journalism students. They decide they want to do a documentary about a would-be slasher killer named Leslie Vernon. And in this world, Freddy Krueger, Mike Myers, Jason Voorhees, they're all real people who have built a mystique. Like, they're not really dream stalking or immortal or whatever. They built a mystique around them. So over the course of the movie, it's told almost through found footage. It is told through found footage. For like 3/4 of the movie, it's told through found footage of him showing all the different ways that slasher killers kind of prepare and how they attack and how they work. And you get to the point, like, you really like this guy. It's played by an actor named Nathan Basil. I think I'm saying his name right. And he runs acting class in California. Really great guy. He's really affable, but he can turn on a dime and become vicious. So you find yourself liking him, but uncomfortable with him. But liking is kind of coming up. So by the time, and you can kind of see where the story's going, it's like eventually he's going to have to go on a rampage. Yeah. What do the journalists do? What do the kids do? And that's when it becomes a regular kind of standard shot horror movie. But up until that point, you're getting kind of more and more uncomfortable because you like the guy, you understand his motivations, even if you can't quite relate to him. And so by the time they switch to a more conventional film, it's almost like a relief. So in my view, I like that as a meta deconstruction of slashers, because it takes the tropes. There's even a segment where, because they're interviewing him at some points, and he talks about like this the feminist criticisms of slashers. He brings up the final girl concept. He brings up womb imagery. It's hilarious because it's done winkingly, but they're taking apart and saying, okay, this doesn't make sense, but here's how we can make it make sense, stuff like that. I like that kind of awareness. A good near perfect slasher is aware of what it's doing, either contextually or subtextually. It has characters you care about. Even if it's a bad guy, you can kind of understand the background. Like one of my favorite slashers, and it was totally made as a kind of ripoff, was Friday the 13th, the first one. Because, there was fear. It was still a novel kind of subgenre. Mm-hmm. And then you discover it's, spoilers again for a 40-year-old movie, it's his mom. It's some old lady. And it's like, wait, what? Because up until that point, all other slashers, Black Christmas, Psycho, Peeping Tom, Halloween, of course, all male. In fact, subsequently, they're almost all male. And then right out the gate of this complete ripoff movie, it's a female. It's an old mom. And I thought that was such a clever inversion of a trope that didn't even really exist yet. But you care about those characters. You love those characters. And so so you have an awareness of what came before you, an ability to take it kind of a step further and try to play with it. Another good slasher is a movie called You're Next, came out in 2013, where it's a good movie. It's a total slasher, but not in the sense that it's a bunch of scared, very sexually hyperactive teenagers at a summer camp or in an abandoned hospital. It's a rich family basically doing a Ponzi scheme on each other. It's really kind of clever. Mm-hmm. The characters don't know they're in a slasher, but the movie is very much like our audience have seen slashers, so let's play with it. Got it. So there's that meta awareness, likable characters, not a quite binary good versus bad, which could be applicable to any horror story. Mm-hmm. And if we're talking film, I want to see some good effects. Don't give me a PG-13. Give me a Tom Savini special, or a Greg Nicotero special. Yeah, I'm playing with my hands. Very Italian.
Well, it is funny. As soon as before you said that you were not a fan of Scream, the thing I was thinking about with the special effects was the garage kill in the movie, which freaked me the hell out because that was my first slasher movie that I had seen.
Okay.
And that was my introduction, and I was just like, whoa, this is so awesome. And of course I've seen now others since. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But that was my first one. So it does have a place in my heart as
I have a further admission. I did not see Scream, the first one, until 3 years ago. To write an article. I kind of avoided it. Like, I'd seen the original spoof. I saw the original spoof scary movie before I saw Scream. Which, if I had seen Scream back then, I would be more interested in it. But at that time, my favorite types of horror, and they're still my favorite movies, was like The Fly, Cronenberg's The Fly, Carpenter's Halloween. I loved Escape from New York, which is not really a horror movie, it's more of an adventure.
Scary parts.
So yeah, it is. But so I saw them breaking. Like I know exactly I remember seeing that. I'm like, didn't they make fun of this in Scary Movie? I'm like, because it's a garage fucking door. Yeah. It couldn't do that. It would malfunction with a cat. So my problem is, and this is probably very true, is I saw it too late. I saw it way too late. Whereas I saw Behind the Mask at exactly, because I saw it in like 2007. It was just something for rent when we saw it at video stores. And I happened to see like, oh, this looks clever. I like this. I'll try this out. And I immediately fell in love with it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, your first slasher, that always stays with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, one other thing I really like about slashers is that even though it's usually misapplied, and actually Stephen Graham Jones was talking about this in the latest issue of Fangoria, there's a sense of justice misapplied. Mm-hmm. Like the killer is out to balance the scales. Now he is doing this in a proper way because the people of the original crime no longer exist, or they're dead, or they moved away. So it's misapplied, but there's a seeking of justice. Because usually the people who do die in a slasher and again, I'm cribbing hard from Steven. So I told him on social media, like, hey, I'm doing this. So if he's watching, hi, I'm crediting you. Don't sue me. No, Steven's a great guy. He blurbed Standalone, actually.
Oh, nice.
Oh my God, I jumped for joy when that happened. But he mentioned, the people who die in a slasher, good ones anyway, good slashers, they're kind of dicks. They're not good people. Like, there's a sense of randomness in movies like Halloween. But even you could, if you're really puritanical, you can make an argument for the people who died in Halloween is, you shouldn't have been doing this, and this. Yeah. In the Friday the 13th movies, there are good kids, but a lot of them are kind of like chauvinistic or really self-absorbed or really uncompassionate. The final girl is a compassionate figure. She's aware of her surroundings, things like that. And she's aware, like in Friday the 13th part 2, I think it's part 2. Yeah. How does I forget her character's name. How does she get over Jason? She puts on his mother's sweater and pretends to be his mother. Mm-hmm. And basically is commanding him, like, it's all right now, but put the knife down. Like, justice has been served. Oh, mom is back. And I always find that really interesting as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that too. Just cool take from that movie.
Stephen Graham Jones, and like I said, I have to credit those ones. Like, he's hella getting into slashers right now, but he's always been interested in slashers, but that's what he's publishing. Like, Mongrels wasn't a slasher novel, which is when I got into him. But like, My Heart's Chainsaw and Don't Fear the Reaper just out now. Like, those are slasher ones. But he wrote years ago, I don't even know if it's still in print, he wrote this book called The Last Final Girl. Mm-hmm. And it's by Lazy Fascist Press. I don't know if it's still available for print because they went out. They closed their doors years ago. But this is an excellent slasher. Kind of plays with a Michael Myers type, but someone who finds Michael Myers like comatose. It is a really unique premise. Okay. It's so I definitely, like, if you like Heart's Chainsaw, if you like Don't Fear the Reaper, if you like Stephen Graham Jones, see if you can find The Last Final Girl.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
When I was looking at other recommendations of books, that was one that kept coming up.
Oh, definitely.
And so it's definitely on my list of ones to find. I terribly admit the only Stephen Graham Jones I have read is The Only Good Indians, which was my first the introduction. I loved it. Absolutely fell in love with it and definitely want to read more of his stuff.
I definitely recommend Mongrels. That was a werewolf novel he wrote in about 2017, something like that. Really excellent. My first exposure to him was a story called Father, Son, Holy Rabbit. I read it in a collection. And it is not supernatural in the least, not a slasher either. It's just beautifully heartbreaking. Like, it just takes your heart like right there. I've used it in creative writing classes. Nice. It's literally the first story I always show my creative writing classes in terms of effect that a story can have on the audience. And kids will get to the end and either they'll immediately get it and they go, Anderson, what the hell did you just give us? Or there'll be kids who haven't quite added everything together. And then the first group of kids explain it to them. And then they look at me in horror. Like, what did you just give us? But it was so good that as soon as I read that story, I knew I had to track down as much Stephen Graham Jones as I could. Like, I'm always going to buy something by him because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's one
you can't go wrong
to find. Yeah.
It's in a collection. I think it's in his collection, The Ones That Got Away. And it's in, I don't know if the anthology is still in print, but it was, The New Black is where I encountered it. That was edited by Richard Thomas. Okay. It's literally the kickoff story. And I was like, what did I just read?
Yeah.
It was so beautiful. Oh, God, yeah.
Okay. I'm making
totally derailed you there. Sorry about that.
No. I'm making a note of that so I can definitely go hunt it down. My next question was, have you written anything that crosses into the splatterpunk or giallo horror genres? And if not, what do you think about them?
Splatterpunk is how I found Skip Inspector. I found Ketchum, although he wasn't, because Splatterpunk is about crossing taboos and examining why those taboos exist when done well. Otherwise, you're just doing extreme horror, which is fine. I'm just not that big of a fan. I love Wrath James White. He's a good guy. He's a good writer. But beyond that, I'm not much of an extreme horror reader. But Splatterpunk I've always liked because I like playing with. I like examining. Taboos and mores and social paradigms. Like, I just find it interesting to read and stuff like that. Like, I'm reading I said before the show began, I'm reading this book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, Carol J. Clover, genre, gender in the modern horror film. And it's predominantly a feminist criticism and analysis of the slasher. I always love it when you can play with stuff. It makes the English teacher in me. I love looking at stuff and acknowledging that there are different viewpoints. So I always like that about Splatterpunk. My first real introduction to Splatterpunk was Skip Inspector's The Bridge, which is a very eco horror, very much almost it runs right up to the line of being didactic, but still good because they were excellent. John Skip's a great writer. Craig was great with him. But I love it. I don't shy away from violence in my own work. I've never shied away from violence in my own work. Like, I'll show, the blade going in and what it does. That's fine with me. It's not necessarily my interest. And that's where we kind of go into giallo. Giallo to me, like, Argento and, well, not necessarily Fulci, but, that crew, maybe it's because I'm 50% of town. I've always liked giallo. It's very mood based.
Yeah.
It's about the vibe. And that's kind of coming back now into horror cinema. You see that with movies, and I haven't seen it because I don't have Shudder, like Skinamarink. We All Go to the World's Fair, which I think is on HBO Max. I have not seen that one yet. There's heavy vibe, like Neo Giallo. Yeah. In terms of my own writing, I don't tend to do much Giallo type stuff. Like, I want people to feel stuff, but not in that sense of just forbidding, because giallo always struck me as a 20th century version of Gothic. Horror in the early 20th century was very, sorry, my leg's itchy. You see my arm going like this, like I'm petting the extreme dog. Was very Gothic, very old castles, old country, mean the new world type deal. And then, Richard Matheson, Jack Finney, people like that kind of brought into the modern day era. And from there, you got giallo, which was kind of this melding of Gothic undertones in a modern setting. I'm getting really analytical here. Sorry.
No, I'm really enjoying it because I'm not as familiar with the history, so I'm digging it.
I'm a gigantic dork. But anyway, so and I've always appreciated that in my own work, it tends to be violent. I tend to take social norms and play with them, and try to put characters into impossible situations and see what they do. The one slasher I did write, standalone, it was me, and I remember distinctly in the 2 years before I finally sat down and started writing it, I was going around asking people if this idea was familiar, and the idea, the kernel of it was, has there ever been a slasher where the killer is as relatable and as you want to see him win as much as you would want to see the quote unquote final girl? Mm-hmm. And I was like, this has to have been done. I remember bugging Max Booth III, Bracken McLeod, a bunch of other people. They probably have no memory of this whatsoever, but I distinctly remember because I was like, this can't be original to me. I am not that creative, which is a terrible thing to say to be a working writer. But I rip everyone. No, I'm kidding. So, and that's kind of a taboo because, in a slasher, there's a reason why the final girl is the final girl. The people who die are the people who die, and the killer is the killer. Mm-hmm. It's very rare you get a sense of senselessness. Like, one of the movies everyone loves, but I also don't like, and there's me just full of hot takes, is The Strangers. I think I never got. I was like, there's that creepy line they play in the trailer because I remember seeing it, and that's what made me want to see it. It's like, why are you doing this? Because you are here. That's a creepy line, but no, I can't connect with that. You're not really subverting anything for me, and then it becomes a series of jump scares. Not to criticize people who love it, because a lot of people do. It's just not my bag. Very much going off again from Jalo and Splatterpunk. I do this. I told you I riff.
It's okay. Riffing is allowed.
I like a good, in my own work, the closest I get to Splatterpunk is the violence, but I'm usually using it as an outlet for the intense, and this is going to sound real pretentious. Apologies to whoever's in the audience for just the whiff of pretension that's about to come through the screen at you. I use it as an outlet for the internal violence that's going on. There's one story I wrote years ago, and it was the first time anyone really paid attention to my shit. I wrote a short story called The Agonizing Guilt of Relief, Last Days of a Ready-Made Victim. Really long title. I get my ideas from long titles from Gary Bromback. Originally published in Chiral Mad 3, and it was originally, and then reprinted in my first book, Bones Are Made to Be Broken. And in it, the main character is this older brother. He has a younger brother who's kind of like just the walking bullseye for everyone in town, including their father. And the whole time of the story is him trying to figure out a way to protect his brother, and not being able to do it because he's a kid and no one believes a kid. So when there are two instances of violence in the story, only two, one towards the end and one at the very, 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 very end, like the last two paragraphs. And in both instances, they became, like, in the first instance, the one that was near the end, it was him just exploding and trying and fighting at the world via his father. And then the last one is what gave the title, gave the story its title. And in both instances, it was just a moment of extreme violence because the pressure had built too much, for that character. So I like examining violence in my work. God, again, the pretension, Jesus Christ. I hate the term author, and here I am saying, in my work. Whoa.
You're allowed to be as pretentious as you'd like to be on this program. It's okay.
Go ahead and hang yourself. Just have fun with it.
Just add a sir in front of your name, and
I have a master's degree. There are letters after my name now. I'm a writer. I always think of writing as very workmanlike, and I kind of shy away from the elbow patches on my blazer type deal. But I always like examining violence, and that's what Splatterpunk did. It examined like our attitudes towards violence versus sex, versus in gender roles, like in standard popular fiction, maybe not so much anymore. Certain people are certain genders and certain races and certain things are very more violent or less violent. And Splatterpunk kind of went, why? Let's play with that. Let's look at that. Who are our standard heroes? Why is the standard hero always this type of person? And that's what I liked about getting back to slashers. Like, slashers does not have a regular hero in this traditional narrative sense. In very patriarchal way, most heroes are buff men of God-fearing. And here you have what's like Laurie Strode in Halloween. She looked like you could break her over your fucking knee.
Yeah.
But she stands up repeatedly to Michael Myers, not Austin Powers. So I think that's where it comes through in my work to wrap up that.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed the diversions on that path also. But that's very interesting, sir. There was a comment that came up, and I just wanted to read it. It was from Lori again. It says, the reason standalone was suggested. The reason standalone was suggested as an intro to your work was because we had just seen My Bloody Valentine, a great Canadian offering. I actually have seen Behind the Mask. It's been a minute, but it was very meta for its time.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Someone else has seen it, thank God.
Somebody else has seen it and enjoyed it.
the first time I was ever on the podcast with James and Don, the Necronomic.com, they examine horror movies, and they're like, well, we love what would you do? I'm like, Behind the Mask. And they're like, what? Because no one else has ever seen it. My Bloody Valentine. Now, Lori, have you seen, are we talking the original or the remake? Which neither of which I've seen in like 15 years. I don't think I've seen the remake since it came out. I don't have very fond memories of it, but at least the original was like part of that whole spate of horror slashers that were holiday themed, you know, Friday the 13th, Halloween, April Fool's Day. The original, My Bloody Valentine, Valentine's Day. God, you could do, you know, see, Halloween 3 was basically St. Patrick's Day. Wasn't it?
Yep.
I think so.
She said the original is the one that she saw.
God, it almost makes me want. Someone else was talking about that recently. I'm like, I think I need to rewind things because it was Valentine's Day a few days ago. I haven't seen either of those in so many years. I'm tempted now just to sit down and pull up and see if it's on Tubi, because Tubi is one of the best streaming services out there.
It's got a lot on it for sure.
I recommend Tubi so much. I keep hoping that they'll give me a sponsorship deal. Just give me money to talk about you. I will talk about you forever, Tubi. I love you so much.
Yeah. The not related to slashers, but the number of bad shark movies on there is absolutely wonderful.
I have a friend, he's a writer by the name of Ed Kurtz, and Ed seems to be bound and determined to watch every single terrible Tubi movie that was ever put on there. And
he has been posting about that quite a bit. Yeah.
And his partner Donjay, I'm like, I think that's how you say her name. I apologize, Donjay, please. I've only ever seen it in writing. Like, I don't know how my wife would not tolerate that. She can barely tolerate jump scares, and like her tolerance for trash is way less than mine. So I'm like, God damn. But yeah, Tubi's great. Again, another diversion.
Where am I in my? Yes, creating a villain is the next question. How do you create a terrifying killer in your works? Even though you've just talked about creating a killer who is, you know, more empathetic in your book. But take us through it.
I was thinking about that. Like, Standalone has a clear villain, protagonist, antagonist. But a lot of my shorter works, even my anthology or my novellas, there's very much a sense of the villain is you, kind of the idea. Like, I have an anthology. I have a novella coming out at some point this year. I revised an old novella called "I Can Give You Life," a cosmic horror, but it's going to be coming out under the title "The Only Way Out Is Through."
Okay,
and that one has a clear antagonist, but not in a good way. It does, but it didn't really play with it. I was more interested in, like, let's talk about the 1950s and elder gods. But in terms of villains, a lot of times the villains are internal. They are themselves. Like we have met the enemy and he is us. You know, that old Pogo quote.
Yeah.
In Standalone, I used the tropes of the slasher. Like, okay, and it was very easy to reverse engineer. It was really easy to reverse engineer from that to, okay, here's the killer. Here's what he's doing. Why is he doing it? Okay, how can I take a left? Basically, when I was creating the villains in this, I was just taking left turns, basically reverse engineering all the tropes and then left turning it. Which is why Adam Caesar, he wrote Clown in the Cornfield and Clown in the Cornfield 2, Friend Who Lives, 2 teen slashers. I would also recommend, since apparently I'm a writer talking about, hey, go read all these other books. He wrote a novel called Con Season. Actually, it's right here. Con Season.
Nice.
And it has a very slasher type vibe to it. It's basically a survival horror movie or horror novel, but I could argue it was a slasher. He called Standalone more of an SF slasher, science fiction horror. And that's because I was turning it. In terms of the villains, you have to, one of my earliest lessons when I was talking to other writers was, you can't have your villains be Snidely Whiplash.
No.
Tying the damsel in distress to the train tracks and rubbing their hands maniacally and, stereotypically. They have to believe what they are doing is justified. And more than that, like everyone in their own self-absorption believes they are they are the star of this play, this life. The spotlight's on me. I'm the hero of the story because it's my story. Why? And a lot of fiction, that's never the case. The bad guy's a bad guy for a plot convenience, not because you actually understand it. Like I love check your brain at the door movies like Demolition Man and Face Off, again showing my age. And Wesley Snipes in Demolition Man and Nicolas Cage in Face Off, they're just doing it because why the fuck not? There's no real empathy. You can't relate to that. Whereas you have a villain like pulling from my favorite authors. I'm going to pull books. That's what I do is I pull books. Red by Jack Ketchum. If you've never read it, it's a beautiful novel. But anyways, the bad guys in that, bad guys sound so 1940s, but it's true. There's this father and son, really rich father and son. And they believe they are correct because they've always been correct. So they will continue to always be correct and they act accordingly. And even if you don't identify with that, you can at least understand it. And that makes them human. Now, to make a great villain is to make the viewer uncomfortable or reader uncomfortable with how much they can empathize with the villain. If you can pull that off, then because that's where for me, that's where the horror is. Like, oh my God, like I really understand where they're coming from. When Avengers Infinity War came out, there were those memes that went out like Thanos was right. And it's kind of like, you're okay with genocide? Like really? I mean, it was said for facetiously, but generally speaking, like that's kind of problematic. But there should be a point in any story, if you're really want to twist the knife on the reader or the audience, where they kind of go, wait, I kind of understand where they're coming from. Ooh. And that makes them kind of examine themselves. I love that aspect. Like, and that's in Standalone, that's what the main character, who is the bad, quote unquote, bad guy, is doing the entire time. It's like, I did this led to me. But I did it for these reasons. And you kind of have this moral quandary, almost like a Sophie's choice of like either side kind of is justified in what they're doing. And then you just play it to the hill. And that's what makes a good villain. Like someone who could, in the right perspective, be the hero. Like if you can flip your story around and make them the hero with very few changes, then that's a good villain because that's one's going to fuck with the audience. And that's fun.
Yeah. I loved that answer because we actually talked about making villains having villains that you can identify with and you can see their point and kind of agree with them last week on the program with Rob Atone. And we were talking about family horror. So it was again, that very personal, like somebody who's a part of your family or somebody who is very close to you, just making it very uncomfortable and real.
The closer horror gets to your heart, not to make it sounds very emo, kind of like I'm gonna scribble dark lyrics in my journal. The more effective it is. And when you can kind of flip the table, like I'm playing. Lori, I don't know if you'll get this when you order Standalone, or anyone who orders Standalone from any bookseller, like please do so. But I don't know if there are any left. When the pre-orders for Standalone going on 3 years ago were happening, the publisher Max Booth and his partner Lori were like, well, let's give a little trinket if they order through the store. And so I came up with these trading card ideas of all the, because Standalone, the conceit is each of the like the main character works as part of a team and they go into various universes and take on the monikers of a famous boogeyman in that universe.
Okay.
And so what I did was I created a bunch of trading cards. Do I have any near me? I do. Looks like this. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh yeah.
So, and on the back, this was made. Oh God, I'm gonna forget his name. Spooner, Luke Spooner did the art for these. He did like 6 of them, and on the back, there's a little bio.
Oh, nice.
And how many kills they had, what movie they appeared in, some fun facts. Because when I was a kid, when comics were entering the 90s heyday, they used to have like superhero cards. You can get Spider-Man or Batman or whatever.
Yeah.
And you had trivia. So I had to create all these different villains. And I had to come up with backstories, and I was really digging deep. Actually, the trivia on this one references 2 characters that were in a Max Booth novel. But this guy, the back of it reads, Cameron Burns is a nice guy. Why won't you believe him? Sure, he lied to you about winning a getaway to an elite yet oddly abandoned ski lodge. And sure, he's been picking off your friends all weekend. And of course, it might look creepy how he keeps messaging you with information that lets you know he knows your every move and thought. But that just means he cares. That just means he knows what's best for you. Cameron Burns is a nice guy. And I've been playing, and I made these in like a half hour one afternoon, and then sent them off, and then they sent it to Luke, and he rocked the shit out of this. This is awesome stuff.
Yeah, those are so cool.
Oh my God, when I got my set and they came in a little plastic sleeve case, it was so great. But anyway, and then I was thinking about it. I was like, I wonder if I could tell a slasher through second person narration. Like you know how they always have POV cameras in a slasher film? What if you told a story like that? Like entirely through you. Tim Wagner did it in a short story called Thou Art God in Dark Faith 2, which came out through Apex years ago. And I was like, can I sustain it? I'm nowhere near writing it yet. But I kept coming back to this card in general because it was the most human character. I was like, I wonder if I could play with, the concept of the final girl and the concept of the slasher killer and, the very specific gender roles in slashers, and make this villain make you uncomfortable as a reader by, I can kind of see where he's coming from, and then feel absolutely disgusted with, oh my God. Because he's the kind of dickhead who'd be like, why'd she friend zone me? I'm like, she friend zoned you because she's not interested. Dude, that's not friend zoning. That's just attraction or lack thereof. I hate that term. And I want to play with that a little bit. I'm not sure if I'm ready to, because like I'd have to. I'll want to shower with bleach and sandpaper afterwards. But I kind of want to play with it.
Yeah.
And then I have to figure out where to sell it. So if I do, but that's literally that's how I create a good villain. Is I start from their perspective. Like, okay, where are they coming from? And then make the other characters not so, it's cardboard.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Again, I made it. I'm feeding you 5-course meals for every quick snack question.
I like that. I don't often get the 5-course meal in the interview, and I appreciate it.
I just love hearing myself talk. It's all right.
I mean, who doesn't?
I talk all day. You think I'd be tired of it after a while?
I personally hate listening to myself talk, so
I kind of go off in my head and be like, "Oh, mention this next," and I'll mention this next, and so I'm not even hearing myself. So I could be like, duck, duck, fuck stool, and I'll never know. I'll be like, I'll mention this couch next.
I'll admit that like I'm really enjoying this interview so far because I am learning so much, and I'll give you that because it's your personality and your educational background and your love for slashers.
I'm like the worst trivia guest ever. I go on Jeopardy and I'd be like just the smarmiest asshole. No, I'm kidding. I wouldn't. Hopefully,
you answer the question and then you just keep going.
Now let me give you the background.
We have to go to the next question.
Calm down, Alex. Whose game show is this?
I guess we're in the wrap up now.
An hour in now, yeah.
We're at the very end. We're at 59 minutes.
Okay.
So the wrap-up questions are basically your favorite slasher, which we've heard of a few. Are there any others that you have not mentioned that you would like to?
It is. In terms of movies, like I kind of laid down some love for Your Next. I think more people need to see that. I, of course, talk Behind the Mask. Oh my God, find Behind the Mask somewhere and watch it. Find Nathan Basil, go find the creators and say you must make a sequel because they have an idea for a sequel and they need to make it. Other slasher movies. I'm blanking because I can think of, like, I always love The Prowler just because they're all repugnant people and has early Tom Savini effects. Not The Prowler, The Burning. The Prowler actually has relatable characters. In terms of books, I've already mentioned The Last Final Girl by Stephen Graham Jones, Con Season by Adam Caesar, of course, Clown in the Cornfield, and Clown in the Cornfield 2, Friendo Lives, out now. Another good one, I don't know if people would classify it as a slasher, but I would, is My Sister the Serial Killer. I forget the writer who wrote that, but she, I don't think it was her first novel, but she was amazing. So just Google My Sister the Serial Killer. And that's an excellent book because it's told from this perspective of literally someone's sister who suspects their sister is a serial killer, and they're just kind of getting away with it. And it was so fun. I read, it's a full-on novel, but I read it in like a day because it just pulled you and pulled you and pulled you in. Awesome. In terms of television shows, I don't watch a lot of television anymore. I watch like the most random things on television. Like I watched The Bear on Hulu. He's a slasher of fine meats.
Yes. Not quite in the horror genre, but
unless you're like a hardcore PETA vegan. I'm vegetarian, but shit, I can appreciate a good looking sandwich. And games, I never got in. I am a terrible 39-year-old. I never got into video games.
That's okay. You know,
I wish I could, because my brother-in-law is a big gamer, and every time I visit, he always wants to pull me aside, be like, we're playing Call of Duty zombie mode, and here's a bottle of like Goldschlager, and we're chucking it and playing games. And yes, drunk, I can totally play games. Sober, not so much. I just kind of I need to move. You see me, I've been moving around like 1980s Michael J. Fox. I can't sit still. So yeah, those.
Yeah, there was one that I was thinking of, and it's promptly gone out of my head.
Damn it.
But there are some really interesting games in the slasher genre.
Yeah.
God. Yeah, it was there. It's gone now. It's totally gone.
I'll tell you how non-gamer I am, because I love the idea of games, and I've known people who wrote games. A friend of mine wrote one of the Tomb Raider movie games. He was one of the writers on it. Yeah, his name's Cameron Suey. He is an excellent writer. He doesn't publish a lot, but if you can find Cameron Suey on one of the social medias,
do we know which game?
Not offhand, because again, not a gamer. But I love the idea of games.
If you said Angel of Darkness, I would die. I'm just telling you that right now.
See, I have no idea what that is.
Like, I know that would be most horror of the games from the Tomb Raider series.
But to show you how old of a game, in college, my roommate had the first Xbox, and there was a game he had called Manhunt.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And I loved that game. It freaked me the fuck out, but I loved that game. But that's literally the last time I've sustained by myself played a game for longer than like a day. Other than like Hitman, I think like a year later I played one of the Hitmans. I was like, I love killing people, which made my RA really worried. No,
Manhunt is a really good, really scary game.
It was terrifying. I played it in my dorm room with the window blinds down. My roommate had gone home for the weekend but left his system. I was like, yeah, it messed with me hard. My girlfriend at the time called me up, and I was like, oh shit. I had a plastic bag to kill people with.
Yeah. If I can remember the name of the game, I will stick it into the comments of the YouTube video when I post it. But for now, we will move on to the second wrap-up question, which is, do you enjoy writing slashers over other kinds of horror?
Yes. I mean, there's only one I've really written that could be considered slasher, like heavy slasher. I love viewing it. I am kind of noodling doing another slasher. I kind of. So here's the irony. I named Standalone because of the joke in slashers that you have like 10,000 sequels.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm going to tell a contained slasher in one place, and I'll never revisit these characters again. And then I was bored one night, and again, I thought of that card because I have the entire set, of course. And I was like, that would be an interesting story. Wait. I mean, it's not really standalone, but it's kind of standalone. And I like stories, and slashers are kind of open themselves up to it, given the very nature of them. I love stories that examine violence, whether on a personal level, on a visceral level. I just want to check my brain at the door and watch, someone's head get split in half. Spoilers for anyone who's seen Barbarian, who hasn't seen Barbarian. Mm-hmm. That happens. I love that, but I like like I said, it sounds pretentious, but it's the most honest answer I can give. I just like the examination of violence, the effect of the violence has on the character, on the characters, and both on the antagonist and protagonist. Like Halloween Ends, like the Halloween reboot trilogy, it's gotten a lot of shit. Halloween Kills has some problematic, but I liked what they did with Halloween Ends, like how they played it. But they always kind of danced around this idea of as he kills, he gets stronger.
Yeah.
Like there's a galvanize, but you could, even without supernatural things, you could have an examination that's violence is galvanizing. And there are people who find violence very galvanizing. Like it kind of gets them up, which is worrisome, but that is in our culture and it should be examined. So splatterpunk slashers, they tend to examine that. And some of them do it with a really heavy hand. Some of them do it with a really deft hand. And that's the joy of slasher, because it's so varied and there's so much various of talent that you can, as a reader, I immediately went from writing to experiencing it to being audience for it. It's sifting through that crap. I will go through a to-be listing and I will look at every slasher imaginable and try to find some good ones. And that's how I found Your Next. That's how I found The Burning. That's how I found The Prowler. That's how I compared. I can compare the movie Pieces to the movie May. May is a much better film. May is so good. But I do. I enjoy writing about the violence. I love seeing how violence affects people. Mm-hmm. Again, I just go off. Sorry.
No,
I'm tired.
No, you do not need to apologize at all. Like, no, I think very similarly, and I don't write slashers. I have not attempted to write a slasher, but I do I like the examination of violence in horror in my, whatever I write, the weird genre that I write.
Yeah, it's if you're
really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just fun to see. I think all storytelling is an examination of the self. That's, again, really pretentious. But, and one of the aspects of our existence is a very violent one. We come up through violence. We go out through violence. And slashers, if nothing else, they really simplify the noise.
Yeah.
If done well. I always have to caveat that because there's a lot of crap slashers out there.
Well, we have reached the end of our program. And I want to thank you very much for coming on tonight and educating.
Thank you for having me.
Educating me, certainly, and talking a lot about slashers, because this was a lot of fun. Lastly, for our audience, where can they find you or learn more about what you've got going on?
Social media wise, I'm on all of them, but I tend to keep certain things locked for family. So on Twitter, you can find me at the very inspired handle of P_M_Anderson, Paul Michael Anderson. I'm on Spoutable now as Paul Michael Anderson. My website, again, taking another page from Stephen Graham Jones. I'm just ripping that man off constantly. Because his website's called demontheory.net. My website, off a story he wrote. My website is called thenothingspace.net. My blog is really out of date on that, but I keep everything else updated where you can find if you're interested in looking up more of my stuff. Yeah, that's where you can find me. It's Twitter Spoutable, most likely, and my website, thenothingspace.net.
Awesome. So go find his books, go find Standalone, and give it a read.
And the new collection, Everything Will Be All Right at the End.
Ah, yes. And Everything Will Be All Right at the End. Just buy all the books. Do the thing, buy the books.
I like royalties. Please give me royalties.
Yes.
I'm hungry.
Thank you, everybody who was in the chat.
Yes, thank you, guys,
for joining. Next week, we are going on to do episode 7 with Caitlin Marceau, and we're going to be talking about winter horror, which is one of my favorite things to write about because I live in eternal winter, even though it is 50 degrees today.
This winter has been pathetic.
It's been very bad.
I love winter myself, personally.
Like, it's rough because I work in an outdoor sporting store. So, with like snowshoes, skis, ice skates, it has been a terrible, terrible winter for all of that stuff.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah. It's like wow.
Yeah, it's just bad. So before I go on about the lament of how bad the winter has been, join us to talk about winter next week, and we will see you all soon. What, end the broadcast?